Hello, students. In our second semester, we are going to study in literary theory and criticism paper the terms that are relevant and have certain theories, and these theories are relevant in the modern literary perspective. As we have seen the 20th century literature or 20th century, different types of relevant theories are proposed, and these theories are quite relevant for the students to understand. Suppose these theories will equip the student's perspective to cast the critical approach in analyzing and studying the literature, as well as it will prove as a tool to understand certain literary movements in English literature. And for that purpose, to develop the critical abilities and critical perspectives, to engross the students under the critical appreciation, these theories have been prescribed by the University Board of Studies. Naturally, we need to go through the theories. Classicism and Romanticism are the two terms that we have already covered under the first syllabus. At the same time, we need to go through just looking at a cursory glance towards these critical concepts. Now, it is quite relevant for the students to understand certain literary works of arts and how to identify them under these so-called terms that we have to think about. So let us go through the realism as a critical concept. As we have seen, it's the Image Abrams books as well as the other theory books like Oxford English Dictionary or a Dictionary of Literary Terms published by Oxford are Routledge, at the same time Routledge Dictionary of Literary Terms. These few books are relevant that you can take the reference of. So let us go through the theory or the term of realism. Realism, as we know, is a literary term used by the critics. As we know, realism it's bringing the literature or the concept down to earth to the realistic conditions around. So, realism is used to identify a literary movement in the writings of the novels during 19th century America, Germany, or anywhere in the world. So we have diverse types of literature that is produced in France. As we know, Henri de Balzac, who used realism in the novel writing in France. George Eliot is also a famous female writer in England who practiced realism in her novels. At the same time, we have William Dean Howells in America, and these novels have brought the realistic picture of the contemporary time, realistic language, realistic socio-economic conditions of the time to penetrate into the realism. And another way, this particular term is also used to designate a recurrent mode in various eras and literary forms of representing human life and experience in literature. To designate a recurrent mode, see, it's another identifying process. Here, the theoretical approach of realism is used to apply to understand the various eras and literary forms in the human creative life. To identify the realistic picture in the novel and on the theoretical perspective, to identify the realistic human life, a realistic experience, realistic socio-economic conditions, and how, in what way the writer has used this particular term to represent the human life in the literary form. So it's also one of the theoretical perspective that is used here. Realistic fiction is definitely a realistic one. We do not have to go into the literary imagination, visionary imagination, or anything romantic. So, we don't have dream sequences in realistic novels. We have seen that it is opposed to the romantic fiction. On the other hand, romance is imaginative, romance is dreamlike, fantasy like, which presents life more picturesque, fantastic, and adventurous, as well as heroic. But realism is opposed, and it is typified to represent the life as it is seen. So, the distinction is in the matter of subject matter. See, what is relevant is quite clearly inadequate. Casanova, T. Lawrence, Winston Churchill, they were the real people in the real life. Their biographies demonstrate that truth can be stranger than literary realism. So, it is more useful to identify realism in the terms of intended effect on the reader. Realistic fiction is written to give the effect that it presents the life. It presents the actual life experience. The slice of life of a particular life is realistically portrayed. So, realistic fiction is given, is written, and gives us the social world as it seems to the common reader. The common feeling that is around the reader will be experienced in the reading of realistic novel. So, evoking the sense that its characters might in fact exist, and it is such a things definitely are happening around us. Such a kind of feeling is aroused in the reader. वाचकांना अशी जाणीव होते का वास्तविक कादंबरी असणारे रिअलिस्टिक वास्तविकदृष्ट्या कादंबरीचं जे लिखाण केलं गेलेलं आहे त्या घटना ज्या घडत आहेत ती माणसं ज्या कादंबरीमध्ये आहेत ती जशी आजूबाजूला आहेत त्या घटना आजूबाजूला घडत आहेत म्हणून कॉमनली सर्वसाधारणपणे आपल्या आजूबाजूला म्हणजे व्यक्तिगत आयुष्यातील घटना त्याही त्याला तिथे अनुभवायला मिळतात. सो इट गिव्स द प्लेजर टू the reader. So, reader gets the feeling of this realistic picture in the novels. To achieve this effect, to achieve this effect, the novelist tries to identify the realist. He may not be selective. But he may select the realistic things. So, the common stuff, common man's life and stuff is portrayed and written about. Commonplace incidents, everyday incidents represented in a minute detail, and very rare aspects of life can be seen in the form of novel. म्हणजे दुर्मिळ असलेल्या सर्वसामान्य लोकांच्या जीवनात ज्या घटना घडतात ज्या तुमच्या माझ्या आयुष्यामधल्या आहेत त्याच तिथे आपल्याला नोंदित केलेल्या पाहायला मिळतात. बट दे मस्ट एंटर दिस मटेरियल. हे जे मटेरियल लेखक लिहित असतो हे एक ऑर्डिनरी एक्सपिरियन्स आहे, सर्वसाधारण अनुभव आहे आपल्या सर्वांचा, अशा दृष्टीने पोर्ट्रे केलेलं असतं. डॅनियल डिफॉई हा 18th सेंचुरीमध्ये असलेला एक एक नॉवलिस्ट आहे, ज्याची रॉबिन्सन क्रुसोई म्हणजे जहाज कुठेही वादळात धडकावं आणि त्याला वेगळी दिशा मिळावी आणि ते शिपरेक त्या ठिकाणी घडतो. असं रॉबिन्सन क्रुसोई, ही इज अ मॅरिनर, ही इज मरून्ड टू ॲन अनइनहॅबिटेड लँड, probably African land. But he made his novel seem to the reader a mirror held up to reality by his repertorial manner of rendering all the events. We have seen, whether ordinary or extraordinary, in the same circumstantial matter of fact, seemingly unselective way. Both the fictions of Franz Kafka and the present-day novels presents us the magic realism. They achieved their great success large part in the realistic manner and in rendering such events that are themselves very fantastic. There are the objective of new criticism that has developed, we have seen in England. There are Russian formalists who followed this more systematically by structuralist critics. And they propose the fact that selection of the subject matter and technique of rendering in a realistic novel depend on their accordance with the literary conventions and codes of the reader has learned to interpret and naturalize in a way that text seems a reflection of everyday reality. As we have seen, some theorists have drawn the conclusion, since all literary representations are constituted by arbitrary conventions, there is no valid ground for holding any one kind of fiction to be more realistic than the other. It's a matter of experience that is shared by all. Some novels, in fact, produce the kind of effect on the reader in representing the ordinary course of events. Skepticism about the possibility of fictional realism is not an empirical doctrine which is based on the widespread experience of readers of literature, but it's a metaphysical doctrine that denies the existence of any objective reality. As we have seen, it is independent of any human conditions, conventions, and cultural formations. So, for better understanding of this particular term, New Literary History by Nelson Goodman, Hilary Putnam are the great help in this realistic theory. So, this way, the realism is to be identified and is to be studied in the literary theory and concept. As we know, we can go more in detail. If you have the books that is available in our library, you can take an issue on your name, and that is a very handy book for. I would suggest you to take the photocopies of this book for the better understanding and keep the ready material handy for your reference purposes when you prepare your own notes. So I would suggest you to go through the books that will be useful for all of you. So like this, realism is the term that we have studied in today's lecture. In our next video lecture, we will again go through some another term in detail, and that will also be useful for better understanding of the literary paper, theory and criticism paper. Thank you.